Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and this is my Lily Chen deck from the Return to Path to Carcosa. I just finished playing her, and anytime I play an Investigator on the channel, I always want to make a video talking about their strengths and weaknesses. For Lily Chen's weaknesses, I can be really brief. I don't know what they are. I didn't see them. Her base defensive stats are 3-3, and she's able to take the alignment of Spirit for +1 head and the alignment of Body, or Balance of Body, for +1 foot. At the point where you have base 4-4 defensive stats and 7-7 soak, you don't really have defensive vulnerabilities. Her economy's not bad. She's a blue character. She gets to run stick to the plan with emergency cash and ever vigilant under it. Throw Stand Together into your deck on top of that, and you should never really want for money, even if you make a ridiculous 19 asset deck like this. I suppose I should talk about why I'm running 19 assets, shouldn't I? Which gets into the strengths of Lily Chen. The disparity between Lily Chen in terms of how complicated the words on the cards are to what she actually does is probably more severe than any other character. You have to read this discipline for your plus head, this discipline for your plus fist, and all the text on Cyclopean Hammer. And then once you've done all that, you realize that what it says is swing at 9 for 2 to 3 damage, no cost. And it actually gets worse from there. Bandoliers can give you +1 head. Tetsuo Mori, Brother Xavier can give you +1 head. And hey, so can a Holy Rosary. Holy Rosary stands out as a card that probably should have been cut from this deck, but hey, swinging at 12 every turn for 2 to 3 damage, and it's basically just guaranteed 3 damage at that point because you're swinging at such a high number that you're pretty much guaranteed to pass by 3 or more. Like, the damage output and consistency of Cyclopean Hammer on Lily Chen is just absolutely ridiculous. The reason I'm running Brandigathuga and Survival Knives is because I wanted backup weapons that could be used in conjunction with the Cyclopean Hammer. The Balance of Body discipline allows you to spend an action to take up to 3 different fight or evade actions and then flip the asset over. So that would allow me to attack with Cyclopean Hammer, a Survival Knife, and a Brandigathuga. And I realize now that I really didn't need to pick up a 3rd fighting asset for that, because I could have just been using the Spectral Razor from my hand. It doesn't have to be an asset in play. However, that was the thought process behind all these assets. And the thought process behind Bandolier and Survival Knife is that if I'm swinging Cyclopean Hammer, the only real way I can improve the value of my deck for damage output was by running these Survival Knives to attack during the enemy phase as well. A very valid counterpoint to that would be that I could have run Vicious Blow level 2. And the more I look at this deck, the more I think that I could have built it so much better. But the reality is that Lily Chen with Cyclopean Hammer is just so obviously and incredibly strong that even building it this suboptimal Survival Knife way that's more fun than powerful, like, it's still insanely strong. And for most of the scenarios, I didn't have Survival Knives or Bandoliers or Brandigathugas. I had some more arcane assets and Dragon Pulse as my backup weapons. And that's worth mentioning, because you can't talk about Lily Chen without talking about Dragon Pull. If we go back to my decks and look at the starter deck for Lily Chen, I'm running Dragon Pull as my main weapon. I've got backup Enchanted Blades and Azure Flames, but I'm also running Scrying and Talisman of Protection just because they're cheap arcane assets to fill the slots for Dragon Pull. Dragon Pull, if you take the Fist Discipline as your first discipline, is relatively easy to have a weapon that's swinging at 8 fists for 2 damage every turn in scenario 1. That's insane. Lily Chen is the most reliable, consistent scenario 1 fighter in the game, even above Mark Harrigan, if she hits Dragon Pull. Coming back to my final deck though, you'll see that Sixth Sense never left. One of the things that I really like about Lily Chen, and the only other character this is true of is Zoe Samaras, is that you're able to run Sixth Sense and just investigate with free actions if you have them. With a deck this asset heavy, that really doesn't come up anymore. But before the final scenario, Lily Chen regularly helped with clues in a way that most fighters couldn't. Despite doing the fighting job excellently and having no complaints, she was one of the most consistent fighters I've ever seen. She's also able to help with clues, and that's really, really valuable. Sixth Sense is the only reason Holy Rosary never got cut. I sure as hell didn't need it for the Cyclopean Hammer stat boost, because what's the difference in swinging at 9 and 10 or 11 and 12? There's just no need for the Holy Rosary unless I'm using it to find clues with Sixth Sense, which is why it stayed in the deck. I have a hard time imagining that someone could build a Lily Chen deck that didn't feel strong. It is so innately powerful to run Cyclopean Hammer and Sixth Sense in a fighter that almost no matter what suite of purple level 0 cards and upgraded blue cards you run, you're going to do incredibly well. I guess if I were going to point out something other than Cyclopean Hammer and this deck as being key, I would actually point out Stick to the Plan as being the most important card in the deck. This deck isn't cheap. It's got 19 assets, and most of them do not cost little to nothing. I only run 6 cards that cost 1 or less. 10 if you count my skills. So running the Stick to the Plan economy setup is probably the most important thing in this deck, just for making sure that it continues to function. Her weaknesses, Burdens of Destiny, I found to be consistently irrelevant. Between the fact that I'm running Brother Xavier, Tetsuo Mori, and have 7/7 Soak, the damage side of this is almost never relevant. But that doesn't matter because I also pretty much never took it as damage and horror. I just flipped a discipline because the alignment of Spirit here, if you come over to its actual card page, its flipped version flips back if you take no damage or horror this round. And with 4/4 in my defensive stats, Promise of Power, Guts in my hand, and the ability to kill every enemy I ever see, Alignment of Spirit will almost always just flip back over the next turn. On the whole, this Lily Chen deck did incredibly well. I have absolutely no complaints about it, but if I had advice to give about this deck, building to use the Foot Discipline optimally should not involve Survival Knives and Brand of Gathaga. Survival Knife is really only here because Bandolier and Survival Knife is a good combo to run alongside Cyclopean Hammer, and using it alongside the Foot Discipline means you're swinging at 7 for 1 damage. It's such a small amount of additional damage that it hardly affects the combo, and you would always rather be playing a Spectral Razor from your hand if you have the option. Brand of Gathaga I actually do still really like in the deck. It's just a short-lived damage weapon that is alright and that can be used easily with the Foot Discipline for burst damage. I don't really know what advice I have for Lily. It seems genuinely hard for me to tell you that you can build her badly. She's just so strong. It's obvious that Cyclopean Hammer was printed for her, and if you build a deck that's able to reliably find that weapon, if you're hard mulliganing for Cyclopean Hammer every game, then you're gonna do great. You want to get clues while you do it? You can. You want to soak all the damage your entire team takes? Go for it. You want to run Survival Knives with the Bandolier? Fine, whatever, who cares? I'm sure the deck would be better if instead of running Survival Knives and Bandoliers, I was running Overpowers and Vicious Blows, and a second copy of Backpack to even more reliably find my Cyclopean Hammer. But I mean, honestly, it's all a moot point. At no point in the game was Lily Chen ever at risk of dying. So yeah, incredibly consistent, powerful fighter, no defensive vulnerabilities, has a weapon that she was clearly built for and that she abuses the absolute shit out of. No complaints about Lily Chen. I could not tell you anything about her that is bad. The worst I can say is that in her level 0 deck, you have to make some hard decisions about what blue cards you're running. I wanted Tetsuo Mori's in my final deck. I needed at least one prepared for the worst in my final deck. And I wanted Stand Togethers for the economy because I desperately needed economy now. But I was also playing a 16 asset deck, only 6 of which were actually spell assets. So since Uncage the Soul wasn't possible, I wanted Stand Together as well. Which means I had to choose, do I want to cut a Stand Together or Prepared for the Worst? Because I'm not cutting Tetsuo Mori, he's in the final deck. And there are a lot of other cards in blue that I would like to run as well. Vicious Blow, Guard Dog, probably several more at level 0 blue that I wanted. The hardest part of Lily Chen is figuring out what you're putting in your level 0 deck from blue. And that's not her being weak. That's just a difficult choice you have to make in terms of optimizing your deck. And if that's the worst I can say about Lily Chen, you can guess where she's going in my tier list. And I do have one criticism for her. If you don't like swinging Dragon Pole at 8 for 2 damage, if you don't like swinging Cyclopean Hammer at 12 for 3 damage, you might get bored of this character. If you don't like just being told pull from the bag, hit enemy, enemy dead, you're probably going to get fed up playing Lily Chen. The same way some people hate playing Rex, because yeah, pull from the bag 3 times, get 6 clues is great, but it can be boring. That's the biggest criticism anyone might have of Lily Chen. The way she's insanely powerful is also very simple. Anyways, I've been rather incoherent. I'm done talking about Lily. She's incredible, loved playing her, and I hope you liked the video. If you did, then like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.